My mom moved in, my daughter-in-law said, her voice sharp and perfectly steady. You're not in charge anymore. You'll need permission for everything. She said it while standing in front of my open closet, lifting a beige wool coat from a suitcase and hanging it where my dresses had always been. I watched her hands move with quiet certainty, as if the decision had already been approved by someone higher than me. When I didn't respond, she added, almost casually, "Use the hallway bathroom," she said. "My mom gets the one upstairs." I stood there holding a ceramic mug of coffee, the heat seeping into my palms without registering. The words landed first, then the meaning behind her. My son hovered near the doorway. The deed was still in my name. That was the only fact they couldn't rewrite yet. He shifted his weight, cleared his throat once, and looked at the floor. He did not tell her to stop. He did not look at me. That was when I knew this was not an outburst. It was an announcement. The story you are about to hear is a work of fiction created by the Her Chains channel team, based on real-life situations to convey lessons about family, emotions, and human values. All characters and events are illustrative. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am 68. This house had been my anchor for more than 3 decades. I raised my son here. I kept the roof steady through years of work and loss. I had just come upstairs to change my blouse after splashing tomato sauce while cooking their dinner. I was not prepared for an eviction of identity in my own bedroom. My daughter-in-law kept talking, explaining how her mother needed space, how efficiency mattered now, how too many personal items created confusion. She slid my silk blouse aside and replaced it with a cardigan that smelled faintly of mothballs and lavender. Each movement felt deliberate. Each word sounded practiced. I opened my mouth to speak. My son made a small sound, not quite a word. "Mom," he said softly. "Let's talk later." Later did not mean now. Later meant never. I nodded once because that was what I had learned to do when the ground shifted under me. I stepped back as if giving them room would somehow restore balance. My daughter-in-law closed the closet door with a gentle click and turned, smiling as though we had reached an understanding. Downstairs, the house continued as usual. The clock ticked. The kettle cooled. Nothing looked different, and yet everything was. I finished my coffee alone. Already sensing that the quiet I was offering them would be mistaken for consent, I waited for my son to say something. Not a speech, not an argument. Just a sentence that would tell her she had gone too far. He stayed where he was, one hand on the doorframe, eyes fixed on a spot near my shoes. The pause stretched. My daughter-in-law adjusted the sleeve of her blouse and kept her voice calm. "Adam and I already talked about this," she said. "It's decided. This arrangement makes sense for everyone." I looked at him. "Did we—" He shifted again. "Mom, let's not do this right now. Do what I said. Decide who lives in my house." He sighed. The sound of someone tired of a problem he had already chosen not to solve. "You're making it bigger than it needs to be." My daughter-in-law stepped closer, her tone measured, almost kind. "My mother needs stability. You understand that. This isn't personal. It feels personal." I said, "You're in my room. You're touching my things." She smiled, thin and controlled. "We're just reorganizing. It's temporary." My son finally looked up, then looked away just as quickly. "We'll figure it out," he said. "Just give it time." Time. That word landed heavier than the rest. Time meant waiting. Time meant accepting. Time meant she had already won. "I need you to say something," I said quietly. He rubbed his forehead. "I don't want to argue." "That's not what I asked." He didn't answer. He stepped back, creating space between us, and that space felt deliberate. My daughter-in-law took it as permission. "We're not trying to upset you," she said, "but this is how it's going to be for now." For now had a tone to it. It wasn't tentative. It was settled. I realized then that the conversation I thought we were having had already happened.
Just not with me in the room. The certainty in her voice, the practiced phrases, the way my son avoided choosing words at all, it all fit together. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't defend me. He chose the quiet because it kept him comfortable.
I nodded once and stepped aside. The decision was already made and it wasn't mine. They moved in after my son's firm lost 2 major contracts. He said it would be short term, just until things stabilized. My daughter-in-law stood beside him, nodding, already talking about schedules and shared expenses. I said yes because it felt like the right thing to do. At first, it was small. She stopped asking before changing the channel. "You don't mind," right, she'd say. Remote already in hand. I told myself it didn't matter. Then she started doing the grocery shopping. "You spend too much on things we don't need," she said, unloading cans and boxes onto my counter. I swallowed the comment that eating well had never been wasteful in this house. When friends called, she'd glance at the calendar and say, "Tonight's not great." I canceled without checking. When she moved a chair because it didn't match the room anymore, I helped her carry it out. My son would smile afterward, relieved, as if peace depended on how little space I took up. Every time I adjusted, I told myself it was temporary. Every time I stayed quiet, it became easier for them to assume my silence meant agreement. By the time I noticed how much had changed, I had already learned how to step back without being asked. 3 months later, my daughter-in-law announced her mother would be staying for a while. Dinner was ready at 6, the way it had always been. I set the plates down and reached for my chair by the window out of habit, then stopped. My daughter-in-law and her mother were already seated, one in my usual seat by the window, the other in the chair my husband used to take. My place was gone. "Just sit there," my daughter-in-law said, nodding toward the chair near the kitchen door. Her voice was light, efficient. I moved without comment. The chair wobbled when I sat, the leg uneven. No one noticed. My son picked up his fork. "Smells good," he said. But he didn't look at me. He spoke to his wife instead. "What time are we meeting the contractor tomorrow?" She answered without hesitation. 9. I told him we're changing the living room layout. Her mother ate slowly, eyes flicking from plate to plate, then to me. She had a way of watching that felt like measuring. "You cook every night?" she asked. "I do," I said. She nodded once, as if confirming a detail on a list. "That's helpful." No one thanked me. No one asked about my day. They talked over the table as if I weren't there, plans unfolding without pause. When the plates were empty, they stood and left them where they were. "I'll get those," I said, though no one had asked. My daughter-in-law paused at the doorway. "Don't forget to wipe the counter." My mother's sensitive to clutter. I gathered the dishes and carried them to the sink. From the dining room, I heard her mother's chair scrape back, heard my son laugh at something I hadn't been part of. The house felt full, and somehow I had already learned how to make myself smaller to fit. I woke before anyone else, out of habit, and went downstairs to start the coffee. By the time I carried my mug back up, voices were already moving through the house. Not raised, purposeful. "We'll start here," my daughter-in-law said. "It's easier in the morning." I stopped at the hallway and watched as she and her mother stood in my bedroom, cardboard boxes open on the floor. My sweaters were folded and stacked without care. "What are you doing?" I said. She didn't look up. "Organizing." Her mother lifted a framed photo from my dresser, turned it over, then set it into a box. "Too many personal items," she said. "They make spaces feel crowded." "That was my husband," I said. My daughter-in-law finally turned to me. "We talked about this. From now on, you'll need permission before making changes or keeping things in shared areas." "This isn't a shared area," I said. "It's my room." She smiled, patient, like I'd missed a step. Not anymore. She moved to the closet and pulled my dresses aside, creating space. My mom needs a full section. She can't live out of a suitcase. I reached for one of my blouses. She stopped me with a raised hand. Please don't touch things unless we agree first. Her mother nodded. It keeps confusion down. Confusion. The word settled between us. They taped a box shut. Donation. Written in thick marker across the top. I recognized the handwriting. My daughter-in-law stacked it near the door. You can keep a few things, she said. Just tell me what you want to hold on to. Tell her ask first. Permission for everything. Downstairs. The kettle clicked off. The house went on as if nothing unusual was happening. But I stood there watching my life reduced to categories keep, donate, remove, and felt something tighten in my chest. When they carried the first box out, my daughter-in-law said over her shoulder, "This will go smoother if you let us handle it." I didn't follow them. I stayed where I was, staring at the empty space in my closet, understanding for the first time that what they were taking wasn't just room. It started with small things. My keys weren't on the hook where I left them. You probably moved them, my daughter-in-law said, already opening drawers. You've been distracted lately. I put them there. I said. She didn't argue. She smiled instead. I'm just saying. You've been forgetting things. Later that afternoon, she held up a saucepan. Did you leave the stove on again? I turned it off. I said. My son stepped in, voice careful. Mom, you should double check. It's easy to miss. I checked. The dial was cold. No one apologized. That evening, my reading glasses were gone. I found them in the trash the next morning, wrapped in paper towels. You throw things out without realizing it. Her mother said mildly, It happens at your age. I looked at my son. Do you believe that? He hesitated. I think you've been under a lot of stress. That word again? Stress. Not lying, not interference. Stress made it sound accidental. My daughter-in-law set a cup of tea in front of me. We just want to be proactive, she said. Maybe it's time to see a doctor. Just to be safe. I'm fine, I said. Of course you think that, she replied. Most people do. My son nodded. It wouldn't hurt. One appointment. Something tightened behind my ribs. I felt watched. Measured. Every pause became evidence. Every mistake became a pattern. That night, after they went to bed, I took a small notebook from the drawer and wrote the date at the top of the page. I wrote where I placed my keys. I wrote when I turned off the stove. I wrote what I said and what they said back. I hid the notebook beneath my clothes. By morning, I wasn't sure which frightened me more, the idea that I might be forgetting, or the growing sense that someone wanted me to believe I was. I found the brochures while wiping down the desk in the den, a task my daughter-in-law had added to my list that morning. They were tucked beneath a stack of mail, glossy and neatly aligned. Sunset Pines Assisted Living, Golden Harbor Senior Care. I flipped one open. Smiling faces. Soft language. A paragraph circled in pen, monthly rates vary by care level. On the back, someone had written numbers in careful handwriting, then crossed them out and written lower ones beneath. Affordable, manageable, my daughter-in-law's handwriting. I heard voices in the kitchen and closed the brochure, sliding it back where it had been. A moment later, her mother stepped into the room. Did you find the stamps? She asked. Yes, I said, holding them up. She nodded, eyes flicking briefly to the desk. Good. We're trying to keep things organized now. I didn't mention the brochures. I didn't ask why they were there or who they were for. I carried the stamps to the kitchen and placed them beside the phone. At lunch, my daughter-in-law talked about long-term planning, about how people wait too long to make sensible decisions. It's kinder to think ahead, she said, slicing an apple, especially when someone might need help later. My son listened without comment. I ate quietly, the words settling into place. That night, I went back to the den after everyone had gone upstairs. I checked the desk again. The brochures were gone. The space where they had been looked intentional, cleared with purpose. I washed my hands and dried them slowly, my mind alert in a way it hadn't been before. Whatever they were planning, it wasn't a suggestion. I wasn't looking for anything when I found it. I was dusting the coffee table because my daughter-in-law had said the room felt neglected, and I wanted one less comment added to the list she kept in her head. The folder was thin, left open just enough to notice. Inside were papers stacked with care, aligned as if they'd been reviewed more than once. The first page caught my name, a draft power of attorney. My son's name printed beneath it, labeled agent. The reason given was written in clean, neutral language. Declining cognitive capacity. Attached was a checklist titled Documentation, with dates and notes like they were building a timeline. My hands went cold. I turned the page. An email printout followed. The subject line read, Property Appraisal. I didn't need to read every word to understand the intent. The house, my house, discussed in terms of market timing and buyer interest. The tone was efficient, confident, final. I heard footsteps and slid the folder back into place, just as my daughter-in-law entered the room. You're still cleaning, she said. I thought we agreed mornings were better for you. I was finished. I said. She nodded, satisfied, and left again. When the house quieted, I returned to the table and read the rest. Notes in the margin, written in the same careful hand I'd seen on the brochures. Document confusion, missed appointments, inconsistent recall. There was even a checklist. I closed the folder and sat very still. They weren't preparing for my future. They were constructing a version of me that couldn't object. A woman who needed help. A woman whose assets could be managed. A woman who could be moved without consent. The realization didn't arrive loudly. It settled. The fear I'd been carrying sharpened into something clearer. Later that evening, my son stood in the doorway of the kitchen. We're thinking about options, he said, just planning ahead. I met his eyes. Without me, he looked away. It's complicated. It's calculated, I said. He didn't argue. That night, I returned to my room and took out the notebook I'd been hiding. I wrote down what I'd seen. I wrote down dates. I wrote down names. I didn't sleep much, but I stopped doubting myself. By morning, I understood the end game. Silence wasn't protection anymore. It was an invitation. I waited until the house emptied before I made the call. My son and his wife left together, her hand already on the steering wheel. His phone pressed to his ear. Her mother stayed behind, dozing in the living room, Victor Salinas' office. The receptionist said, "This is Eleanor Vance," I said. "Arthur Vance's widow." There was a pause. Then a softer voice. "Give me a moment." Victor recognized my name immediately. He listened without interrupting as I told him what had been happening, what I'd found, what they were planning. "When I finished," he said, "they're building a case. Not for care, for control. I won't fight them." I said, "I'll move faster." 2 days later, I went to an appointment I didn't tell them about. The evaluation was quiet and thorough. The doctor asked questions, then harder ones. He watched how I answered. When it was over, he signed the document and slid it across the desk. "Sound mind," he said. "No impairment." I kept it subtle, just enough for them to feel confirmed, not challenged. I let my daughter-in-law catch me staring at the calendar as if I didn't recognize the dates. She smiled each time. "See," she told my son, "this is what I mean." Meanwhile, Victor worked. A buyer with cash, no listing, no open house, a quick close. The paperwork moved without noise, without delay. My daughter-in-law started speaking to me slowly. "We'll handle the mail," she said. "You've been overwhelmed." I nodded. I thanked her. I wrote everything down once they left the room. On the fourth day, she leaned against the counter and said, "You're doing better when you let us manage things." "I know," I said. "I forget sometimes." She touched my arm, satisfied. "That's why we're here." That night, I packed a small bag and hid it where they wouldn't look. I laid out my clothes for the morning and slept lightly, listening to the house settle around me. They believed the role they'd given me. They didn't see the work already finished. They were waiting for me in the kitchen that morning. My daughter-in-law stood near the counter, coat already on. My son leaned against the wall, arms crossed, tense in a way he hadn't been before. "We're running late," she said. "Grab your purse." I walked past them and placed my keys on the counter. The sound was small, but it stopped everything. "What's that?" my son asked. "My keys." I said, "I won't be needing them." My daughter-in-law frowned. "Don't be dramatic." I reached into my bag and slid an envelope across the counter. "The house has been sold," I said. "My attorney has served the formal notice. The clock started yesterday." She laughed once. "You can't sell the house. You're confused." "I'm not," I said, "and the sale is complete." My son picked up the paper, his face draining as he read. "Mom, this says I know what it says," I replied. "I signed it. I'm of sound mind. I made sure of that." She stepped forward. "Where's the money safe?" I said. "And not for managing." My son finally looked at me then. Really looked. "You planned this." I protected myself. I said, "There's a difference." Silence settled, heavy and final. I picked up my bag. "I'm leaving now," I said. "Any further communication goes through my attorney." I walked out without waiting for permission. At the airport, as Savannah slipped behind me, I felt the grief arrive. Not for the house, for the family I thought I had, but dignity stayed, and dignity was enough. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters here. What I learned is simple and hard-earned silence can be kindness. But boundaries are survival. Love doesn't require surrender. And no matter your age, you don't need permission to protect your own life.